Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Tom Rogers, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Major David Rodley. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Katunga Primary School in Victoria. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to driver Leslie Walter Day. Leslie Day was born in 1893 in the Newcastle suburb of Islington, the youngest son of Thomas and Susanna Day. He attended school in nearby Hamilton and after leaving completed an apprenticeship as a carpenter. Day was an active member of the Hamilton Methodist Church Choir and was secretary of its Sunday school. In July 1915, Day enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force. He joined the 30th Australian Infantry Battalion and undertook training at Liverpool Camp outside Sydney. Most of the men of the 30th Battalion, like Day, came from the Newcastle region. In early November 1915, he embarked from Sydney on board the transport ship Beltana. After arriving in Egypt in December, over the next 6 months, he trained at Tel El Kabir and became a driver in the transport section of his unit. In June 1916, Day and his battalion sailed to France to join the British forces fighting on the Western Front. In addition to the frontline fighting men, each battalion had a small transport section as part of its headquarters. As a driver in the transport section, Day was in charge of the horses that drew the cooking wagons for D Company of the 30th Battalion. His comrades remembered him as a cheerful character who they knew by the nickname of Lionel. The 30th Battalion had its first experience of Western Front warfare at the disastrous Battle of Fromelles in northern France. Within 24 hours, more than a third of its men were killed, wounded or missing. The 5th Division, of which the 30th Battalion was a member, was taken out of the front line and spent the rest of the year regrouping and training to bring it back to its former strength. During 1917, the battalion occupied the town of Bapaume when the Germans retreated to a stronger defensive position along the Hindenburg Line. It also saw action at the Second Battle of Bullecourt and Polygon Wood later in the year. The battalion was in a reserve role, and Day's role included moving material to the troops on the front line. The unit spent the winter of 1917 and 1918 in Flanders near the French village of Messines. In spring 1918, the Germans launched what would be their final offensive of the war, known as the German Spring Offensive. The 30th Battalion was stationed behind the front line in northern France, close to the Belgian border. Although the men were not in the front line, they were still subjected to German artillery shelling. On the 23rd of March 1918, Day and another member of his unit, Corporal Vivian Bailey, were in a transport wagon when it was hit by a German high-velocity shell. Both men were killed. Day was 24 years old. He was buried in Westhoff Farm Cemetery near Ypres in Belgium, alongside Corporal Bailey and 129 other Commonwealth soldiers of the First World War. His mother had the epitaph, "Peace, perfect peace," inscribed on his headstone. There was a further loss to Day's grieving parents when they asked why his personal effects had not been returned to them. The package containing his personal effects was bound for Australia on the steamship Barunga, which was torpedoed by a German submarine off Cornwall in July 1918. British destroyers were soon on the scene and managed to rescue all aboard, but Day's personal effects and those of about 5,000 other Australian soldiers who had died on the Western Front were lost. In Australia, Day's church held a memorial for the soldiers of Hamilton who had been killed in the war. Members of the choir wore badges with the purple and yellow colours of the 30th Battalion in memory of their former colleague. Leslie Walter Day is listed on the Roll of Honour to my right among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember driver Leslie Walter Day, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, like we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen and students, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.